All right, let's get right into it. We're about to explore a thought experiment that uses some surprisingly simple math to ask, well, maybe the biggest question there is. Is humanity's time running out? This, my friends, is the Doomsday Argument.
I mean, look at that. That is a heck of a claim. This is often how the argument is presented, and yeah, it's what makes it so unsettling. The idea is that you don't even need to look at stuff like asteroids or killer AI. Nope. This formula suggests we can calculate a probable end date for us just by knowing where we are in the grand scheme of human history.
So that's the bottom line. This isn't about how we might end, nuclear war or climate disaster, take your pick. This is purely a statistical prediction of when. And it is a deeply profound and honestly pretty chilling idea to think about. Okay, so let's pop the hood on this thing. Where in the world did this idea even come from? And what's the actual logic that makes it tick?
Well, the concept actually came from two different physicists, working completely separately. First, you had astrophysicist Brandon Carter back in '83, who came up with a really complex version for other academics. But a decade later, another physicist, J. Richard Gott, created a much more intuitive version. And that's the one that really brought this idea to the masses. So we're going to focus on Gott's version, just because it's so much easier to wrap your head around.
To really get a grip on the Doomsday Argument, we actually have to start with the Berlin Wall. Yeah, I know, it sounds totally random, but it's the key analogy Gott used. And once you get this, the whole thing just clicks into place.
It all starts with this one big assumption. It's called the Copernican Principle, or sometimes the principle of mediocrity. You know how Copernicus showed we aren't the center of the universe? Well, this is kind of the same idea, but for time. It says your moment in history probably isn't all that special. You're likely not living at the very, very beginning of humanity's story, and you're probably not at the very, very end either. You're just somewhere in the middle. You're typical.
So check this out. Here's how Gott actually applied this in real life. It's 1969 and he's visiting the Berlin Wall. He thinks to himself, okay, my visit is probably happening somewhere in the middle 95% of this wall's total existence. And just based on that one simple thought and knowing how old the wall was then, he made a statistical prediction for its total lifespan. And the wild part? He was right.
All right, so you probably see where this is going, right? We're going to take that exact same logic, the one Gott used for a wall in Berlin, and we're going to apply it to something, well, a whole lot bigger, the entire human species.
Okay, first, we need a starting point, and that number is huge. Demographers figure that somewhere around 100 billion modern humans have ever been born, up to right now. So that's our end past, our current position in the complete timeline of every human who will ever live.
Now, let's plug that into Gott's formula. The main idea here is that there's a 95% chance that we are not in the first 2.5% of all humans who will ever live, and we're not in the last 2.5% either. So using that 100 billion number, the math spits out a 95% confidence interval for the total number of humans who will ever exist. And that range is somewhere between about 102.5 billion and 4 trillion. And this chart really shows you the difference. Now, that upper limit, 4 trillion, it sounds enormous, doesn't it? At our current birth rates, that would give us about another 31,000 years, which, okay, sounds like a long time, but it's nothing compared to those sci-fi dreams of a civilization lasting millions of years and colonizing the stars. But that lower bound, well, that's a whole lot sooner. But of course, it's not that simple. Not even close. This whole argument has been picked apart and debated for decades, and there are some really, really powerful criticisms against it. Oh, not by a long shot. Philosophers, statisticians, they've all taken a crack at its core assumptions. Is it a genuinely profound insight, or is it just a clever mathematical trick? Let's get into the major objections.
So, critics point to a few massive holes. First, there's the presumptuous philosopher's problem. Basically, why on earth should we assume we're a random sample? The very fact that we can even think about this stuff might make us unique, not typical. Then there's the reference class problem. Who are we even counting as human? Does that include future transhumans, cyborgs? What if we create AI? Then there's the fact that the math just seems to write off optimistic futures where we colonize the galaxy and trillions upon trillions of people are born. And finally, some statisticians just say you can't even apply this kind of math to a one-time thing like the history of a species.
So, if the argument is so full of holes, why do we even bother talking about it? Well, because even if it's not a real prophecy, it serves a really important purpose.
The reason this thing has stuck around for so long is that its true value might not be in its accuracy, but in the new perspective it forces on you. Think of it less as a calculator and more as a philosophical tool.
People who defend it say it's an absolutely essential wake-up call. It's like a mathematical punch to the gut of our natural optimism. You know, that built-in assumption that everything's just going to keep going forever? It forces us to take these massive existential risks seriously and reminds us just how fragile our whole civilization is. It essentially flips the script and says, you think we have this long, amazing future? Prove it. So, after all of that, what are we supposed to take away from this super strange, kind of scary thought experiment? It really all comes down to how we see ourselves in the huge sweep of history. At the end of the day, the Doomsday Argument isn't about circling a date on a calendar. Its real power is philosophical. It forces us to look our own fragility in the eye and think seriously about our responsibility to all the generations that might or might not come after us. It makes the abstract idea of humanity going extinct feel incredibly personal and incredibly urgent.
And that leaves us right here with this one central question. The argument basically forces you to make a choice. Do you believe that we are special, that we're the pioneers living right at the dawn of a vast interstellar human future? Or do you believe we're just typical, just another generation somewhere in the middle of a story that might be a lot shorter than we like to think? The math can't give us the final answer, but just asking the question, that changes everything.